Okay, we are live now. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I, Nikhar Dota, Deputy Editor, India Business and Trade, am pleased to welcome you all to today's panel discussion on strategic capability building for business success, organized by the Trade Promotion Council of India. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to our panelists for the day, Professor Vivek Suneja, Dean, Faculty of Management Studies, Delhi University, and Member Committee for Advanced Trade Research, TPCI, Professor Anush Kapoor, IIM Ahmedabad, Mr. Umang Patel, Associate Director, Business and Strategy, CIPLA, and Mr. Ashutosh K, Founder and CEO, Growth Jockey. In a China Plus world, amidst various pandemic-induced supply chain challenges and geopolitical tensions, it is imperative for organizations aspiring to be global to first look inward, assess their preparedness, and build their strengths where it truly matters. Companies with the right combination of capabilities can succeed in this milieu by turning disruptions into opportunities that synergise their unique value proposition. Research tells us that when senior leaders role model the behavior changes they're asking their employees to make, transformations are 5.3 times more likely to be successful. For this, capability building is the foundation stone for an organization to succeed. Capability building goes well beyond traditional training of employees. It is the abilities of an enterprise to operate its day-to-day business as well as to grow, adapt, and see competitive advantage in the marketplace. Corporate strategy is the key when it comes to optimizing organizational capabilities. Johnson and Scholes, popular names in the realm of corporate strategy, define strategy as the direction and scope of an organization over the long term, which achieves advantage for the organization through its configuration of resources within a challenging environment to meet the needs of markets and to fulfill stakeholder expectations. Michael Porter, the other modern day strategist, believes that for companies to succeed in such a radical business environment, they need to make carefully calibrated trade-offs and create a consistent fit across the activities that they're treading on for growth. A strategic approach to capability building is important as India aspires to be a $5 trillion economy over the next few years. Piyush Goyal, the Commerce and Industry Minister, acknowledged that to achieve this goal, it is imperative that the share of exports in India's GDP rises from 21.4% in 2021-22 to at least 25% or $1 trillion. Since 66 lakh MSMEs in India are the backbone of the Indian economy, they will play an integral role in promoting India's growth. Taking a cue from this webinar will look at various growth strategies that Indian companies can deploy in order to succeed in global markets by enhancing their operational and strategic capabilities. To kickstart the discussion, I would like to urge Professor Vivek Suneja, Dean, Faculty of Management Studies, DU, and Member, Committee for Advanced Trade Research, TPCI, to share his inputs on what is implied by a strategic perspective vis-a-vis a tactical one, and why is it important for companies, and how strategic are companies in their business planning, particularly in the context of India, and what are the disadvantages of strategic myopia that you see?
And thank you, Nikhar. So there are two parts to your question. The first is what is implied by a strategic perspective as opposed to a tactical approach. And the second part is how strategic are Indian companies. So let's begin the first part. So as you mentioned in your introduction, strategy is about long-term goals and how you get there. Now, there's one meta goal which is common to everyone, right? So that's a meta goal that every organization, whether it's a public sector firm or a private firm, an NGO, or even a family is also an organization. Any organization must aim to create value. So value creation is the common meta goal that any organization has. That's the strategic goal. How do you define value and how do you measure it? So value is basically the value of output minus the value of inputs. So nobody produces everything on its own. Organizations are not Robinson Crusoe entities. They buy certain things from outside and then they work on them and they transform the inputs to outputs. And the efficiency or the effectiveness that's involved is the key strategic objective. So inputs to outputs and the difference between those. So if you have a value of output and you can value your purchase inputs, you subtract the input value from output value and the difference gives you a value of the output. But things are not that simple when it comes to measurement. So a broad distinction first between entities which work for the market, let's call it the private sector or for the profit sector, for-profit sector, and then the not-for-profit sector. So when it comes to measurement, things are simpler for the for-profit sector. So suppose you have a hospital like Max, and you want to measure how much value it creates, or you have Tata Steel or whatever working in the private sector, all you do is a value of output, which is a revenue, minus the cost of purchase inputs, everything Tata Steel bought from outside, raw materials, power, and so forth. And the difference is the value produced. The VAT, value added tax, is imposed on this value that has been created, value of output minus value of inputs. And you need to maximize that. That's the strategic objective. When it comes to not-for-profit sector, public educational institution, health institution, the Indian Army, the civil service, trade promotion council, you don't have a ready measure of revenue, which is market given, because neither FMS, where I am, nor the Trade Promotion Council, we don't generate a revenue based on market prices. You might still sell something, we might charge something, but they're not market determined. They're often government financed, so in the case of NGO, they come from funds which are given by donors. So you can't use revenue as a measure of output. So in such cases, how do you measure output? You measure it through multiple measures. In my own case, you will be rated on number of people we trained, number of students who came out, how productive they were. One measure may be placement salaries. It's not a very good measure, but that's one measure. How much research we did. So there are multiple measures. How much value does the public hospital like All India Institute of Medical Sciences create? Well, again, multiple measures, no simple. Number of patients treated, number of patients who got well, complications, research done, so forth. So more complex. But that's the general idea. Value of output minus value of inputs. Then what do you do with this value? Well, you distribute it to your internal stakeholders. And economics, we say there are 4 classes of stakeholders: labor, capital, land, and entrepreneurship. And so if Tata Steel generates a certain amount of value in a year, suppose 100 crores, just a hypothetical figure, then that 100 crores need to be split between people who helped create those 100 crores. So there'll be labor, and managers are included under labor. So you can have white collar, blue collar workers, and labor gets wages. If you hide land, that gets rent. If you have got debt capital, that gets interest. And what remains, equity capital, they get profit. So after you created value, you need to distribute value. And that, again, is a strategic decision. If you don't distribute it in a way that keeps all stakeholders happy, then they will not cooperate next time around. There'll be sullen employees, they will not give their best, and it can be very difficult to keep everybody happy. So distribution is a key strategic decision which is often neglected. Take Tata, for example. I mean, at Jamshedpur, and this goes back almost a century, they treat their labor, and most of the labor comes from tribal areas, in a way which is very different from some other companies might do. So you have a whole city there, which is managed actually by the Tatas. And you'll have houses for the workers, yeah, free education for the kids, you'll have sanitation. Now that will push up the wage bill, and everything else equal, leave less for the shareholders. So while you might be creating a lot of value, partially everything else equal, profits may go down. Of course, everything is often not equal, because if you look after your workers very well, they will perform for you better than otherwise, and that might lead to value creation, and they might help you improve quality in the quality circles and give you suggestions. So distribution and creation are not independent. How you distribute can also enhance, if you do a good job, the amount of value created. Okay, come to value creation itself. How do you decide where to create value? So the scale and scope of the business, what products you produce, what part of the value chain you engage in. Apple, for example, its value chain is right across. It makes the software, it makes the chips, or gets chips made, which it oversees. It doesn't make the chips. I take that back, but it oversees that process. It is involved in hardware, as opposed to, say, Dell, which is basically an assembler. So what part of the value chain you get in, and whether you get into computing or hotels or education, the scope of the business and the scale. What determines all that? Those are major strategic decisions. So the first thing you need to determine is your value proposition, what we call the strategic architecture. What do you want to do? And that depends essentially on two things. And Indian companies can sometimes be a little weak on this. It depends on your core competencies, and it depends on what the market wants. So the external environment and the internal. And the internal is determined by your core capabilities. What kind of things do you do well? And core competencies are essentially capabilities which others don't have. And therefore, those give you distinctive competitive advantage. Because everybody has those capabilities, they'll do exactly what you do. And then there'll be massive price competition, and everybody will lose out. So do something which others can't, your core competencies. How do you get your core competencies? Through two ways. One is a learning curve, an experience curve, and a learning curve is partially an error curve. Because when you learn whether to do bicycling or swimming or produce chips or do consulting advice, you'll make some errors. As long as you're learning from them, then that helps your capabilities. You can, of course, acquire capabilities. You can buy firms, startups, and so on. But then you have to assimilate them. If you can't assimilate those capabilities, if they sit outside, then in a sense you bought them, but they're not really part of your core competence. Why Indian firms sometimes struggle with this bit? I mean, they struggle because, one, the environment is often so rapidly changing, and that's happening post-pandemic as well. So we all get engaged in firefighting day to day. Our thinking becomes short-term. After all, there's limited time and energy. Also, we get locked into our functional areas. A lot of companies don't do enough cross-functional integration. So partially because of the incentive structures, partially because there's too little cross-functional talk. So marketing people look at marketing, HR looks at HR, finance looks at finance, but strategy is cross-functional. And unless you bring people together, and that won't happen. And we can talk about that a little later. Then there's fear of change. There are vested interests, which is to maintain the status quo, because otherwise change might mean that you have to develop new capabilities. So all that can get in the way of strategy making. And as I said, strategy is essentially about determining what you want to do and match your capabilities, your core competencies to the need of the environment. A strategic fit between environmental needs and your own capabilities, but in a dynamic sense, not in a static sense. So I think that's perhaps an introduction to the kind of questions you're asking.
Thank you so much, sir, for explaining it so well. This brings me to the next question that I have for you. What post-pandemic landscape transformations do Indian companies need to account for? In terms of, say, Porter's model or Prahlad's core competencies or SWOT analysis, when it comes to strategic capability building.
Right, thanks. So we can build up on what we said. So what has the pandemic done? Pandemic was a major disruption. Now that we're getting to post-pandemic phases, two things are happening. One, of course, the scale of activity is resuming. So in certain sectors, it's a question of only getting back to where you were and hopefully carrying on with the growth story. So that's one part, restoration of the status quo. The other, of course, is the pandemic has changed the business environment, and in many ways. So just to give two examples, for example, the use of the internet, both on the supply side and on the consumer side. So on the supply side, we are working from home. We're experimenting with hybrid models so that you can socialize when you come together, but for information purposes. And I'm sure other participants will say more about this, both from the industry end and also Professor Anuj from what's happening to education. So a hybrid way of sharing information and interacting. But also consumer patterns have changed. So a lot of people started buying from Amazon or Flipkart or whatever, because simply one couldn't go out. But now that things have returned so-called normal, a lot of people have realized it's still convenient to buy from Flipkart and whatever. And that's happening both in the C2C and B2B space. So things have changed. It's not just activity resuming to normal. The pattern of activity has changed. And I think we need to factor that in. Of course, there's a global reconfiguration of value chain, something that you mentioned. So things are not happening, and that's largely because Chinese response to the pandemic and the world realizing that you can't be dependent just on one nation if things go wrong, and the Chinese themselves are reconfiguring the economy. So on the demand side and on the supply side, things have changed, which means we need to do a strategic rethink. And as I said, there are two parts to this, one or three parts. Is your value proposition changing? Number one. And that's dependent on whether the environment has changed. So we must rescan the environment. And what about our core competencies? We must reassess them. Are core competencies any more relevant? Do we need to get rid of some of them, modify some of them, acquire some new ones? Getting rid of old competencies is a major issue. So a core competence can become a core rigidity. It happens in our personal lives. So capabilities are like routines. If you want to form a new habit, it's pretty difficult, right? If I want to get rid of an old habit, that's even more difficult. And if you have to do those together, get rid of an old habit at a personal level, I'm used to say getting up at 7 in the morning, I need to get up at 5. I mean, that's very, very difficult. So similarly with firms, because firms are full of people, they need to talk to each other. There's a lot of teamwork involved, so it compounds the problem. Now, of course, you can use all kinds of tools. So Porter tool, you can use 5 Forces Porter tool to reassess the environment. And as we know, Porter talks about bargaining power of buyers, bargaining power of sellers, threat of entry, threat of substitutes, intra-industry rivalry. So you think that's one tool by which you can look at the demand side and see how things have changed. Has the bargaining power of buyers changed as a result of what's happened, or threat of entry has changed? Some new substitutes have emerged. But of course, it's not just passive. You can use Porter forces to shape the environment. Often we use Porters to react to it, right? To see how. So this old quote, you must change with the world as long as you're not powerful enough to change the world. So reactive versus active. So you can use Porter to change the environment if through being smart or through being big. And then, of course, core competencies. So again, map out your competencies in relation to your value proposition. And as I said, three kinds of capabilities. One is strategic or architectural. What is your value proposition? How do you, so low-cost airlines produce value in a very different way from the, the high-cost airlines or the full-fledged carriers. Starbucks value proposition is very different from your normal canteen, coffee canteen. And, I mean, he essentially gives you some coffee, but basically is giving you a place where you can chat, an ambient environment, and coffee enables that. So what is your value proposition? And how is it changing given what the pandemic has done? Once you've decided that, you look at functional capabilities, marketing, HR, IT, whatever. And as I said, the biggest cross-functional capabilities where people struggle. And some suggestions on how you get your cross-functional capabilities going. One, look at your incentives. If they're only tied to functions, how do you expect people to cooperate with each other? Then your promotion policy, your rotation. Are you rotating your managers between different functions? Of course, that means that their expertise in one sector may not easily travel to another. But on the other hand, if you don't get them to move from one to another, how will they acquire any cross-functional capabilities? And finally, which is easier done, but is most imperative. I've just been to a strategy meet of one prominent PSU over the weekend. And that was the first time people at the senior levels from various functions met. And it helped, of course, that they met outside the office, which is another recommendation. Take them to the seaside or to a mountain so that they become less defensive and they can chat. And all the real talking happened, not in the formal meetings. It happened while having dinner together, walking together, because that's when people will talk and trust each other. So trust creation is, again, absolutely imperative if you're going to get cross-functional capabilities. And without cross-functional capabilities, you cannot have strategic capabilities. Because strategy is about the whole, not just about the parts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for explaining it so well to us and our audience through practical examples. This brings me to our next panelist, Mr. Ashutosh K. He is the founder and CEO of Growth Jockey, a company that brings cutting-edge business solutions for diversified industry verticals. And sir, I would request you to share your thoughts on what unique value proposition does Growth Jockey offer to its customers, and how does it equip CXOs with flexibility to augment their skills and the bandwidth with respect to their business needs?
Hi, Nikhar, thank you so much. And thanks a lot to all the panelists. And I would like to especially thank you once again for inviting to this panel. And I'm thoroughly delighted to hearing Professor. After a long time, I got this opportunity to feel like as a student again, going back to the textbook. Right. So thank you so much, sir, for beautifully crafting the strategic fit. And I really, recalls like while you were explaining, I was scanning through all the business problem I'm currently facing and we are going through. And last couple of meetings, I scanned through that. Okay, where, what are the challenges we have to really, go and do it. Before coming, in terms of what exactly we are doing, what I am looking for this is right now, I would say, post-COVID and the topic, I will just try to, fetch some word and then take it forward. So we started in January 2020. And when I decided to last, I was leading OYO India, and then I decided to build Growth Jockey. And it was single one mission because accidentally, I would say since 2010, I have been kind of part of building new businesses. So at Airtel wanted to build payment bank, and Sriram, who joined as a managing director, he picked me up somehow at the core team. Since then, I got I would say fascinated about building business right from scratch. People, they are using term like idea to unicorn, something like that. Journey is not very fancy the way it sounds, but yeah. So that is where we started. In January 2020, when we started, we all know that COVID hit was prevalent in March 2020. So just after our incubation, etc., and started facing a lot of challenges here in this. And the one thing which also came to our DNA now is like all the companies where we were going for some other services, etc., they started approaching us that now tell us how to operate in COVID, because suddenly our business is going completely down to almost zero. And that is something helped pushed us completely to pivot very fast. Like before born, in fact, we were forced to pivot in terms of building more capabilities and borrowing the word like strategic fit to ourselves, right? So one thing I would say that what I've experienced in the last 2 years during the COVID and post COVID is like a lot of organizations, they have to kind of reimagine their businesses entirely, like irrespective. I would say I will leave the top 5% who has the technology at their core DNA. But apart from that, there are large companies which are operating businesses, and largely I would say who are into the product marketing. They are selling the product. Even there are companies like I would say there are product which is being sold as non-smart product, which is like FMCG product, and then there are consumer lifestyle smart product. There are products where we have the scope to take them to IoT connectivity, etc. and all. Even there's a large part of the company which are producing smart product. They have not built the smart selling or smart business capability. And that is where I started seeing them. They are struggling while they have the product and they are talking about that my product is smart. It can, you can operate with Alexa or etc. Like for example, there is a company which is selling smart fan, and they are now leading in India, and we were talking about them. When COVID hit, the fan was, as a user, you can run it using your mobile app, you can connect to Alexa, you can connect to Google Assistant, etc. But what about the sales? What about the channel partner? What about like I would say discovery? So entirely like how you are connecting to them. That is something it has to be really curated. The second thing is, like you say, reinvent or rebuild. I would say that there are three things which we go and we tell to our client as well, that now is the time where you have to reimagine the business, rebuilding the organization. Like, a lot of rebuilding, when I say to the organization, it's all about the org, the talent mix you are creating, what kind of DNA now you need in a, latest fit. Probably the people who worked very well for you in the the last decade, they will not be the anyway the growth leader for that. Probably they will bring a lot of baggage which will not help you transform now to the newer DNA. So that is the rebuild the organization. Reconnecting with the customer, now it's very, very valuable, because transactional relation with the customer, you sell and forget, will never let you now create the value. So if you are connecting with the customer, how you are solving CLM, which is customer lifecycle management, or how you are actually moving towards without losing your core to create a better LTV with the customer. So you don't go like, and do any random stuff, I would say, buy anything to just, monetize your customer base and all that. There are mistakes which many companies they did, but there has to be a very seamless strategic fit where how you are going to define the, the connectivity with your customer. And the last point is re-evaluate the complete value chain, right? Which Sir has also explained, that entire value chain, whether you are a marketplace, there is a supply or demand, or there is a, you are selling on omni-channel or you are selling on offline channel. Your internal stakeholder, your external stakeholder, every complete value chain has to be, looked at in a way that, okay, you were one organization which has, let's say, some capability, but the new age organization which requires a lot of hybrid environment, hybrid solutions, a well-connected, transparent environment, or real-time data synchronization and all that. Are you actually being ready, for that or not? So that is something, which organization has to, I believe, go through that. Again, one thing when I say is like, you reimagine the businesses. For example, I will give you, it might be interesting in terms of, there is one organization in COVID, they were operating buses, And suddenly there was a government rule that you can't operate bus with a full capacity, and you have to reduce the capacity by half. Only the half of this you can run. Now the one thing which quickly we came around and solved is like, okay, you can go with the half capacity, but still you can use the half capacity, like the loading capacity, not the space capacity, in a different way. You add bus freight to it. So like every buses, given they are allowed to carry some weightage, since you are going half on the passenger, you can add half now on the freight carriage, and they build up, because you are a tech at DNA, you build a tech and immediately you start scaling. The second is when it requires the user growth, etc. The traditional organization and the thought was, because they are incumbent and they manufacture buses at a large scale, is going offline, and or they go and acquire customer directly in a very traditional way. But then there was a growth hack that every customer, irrespective you are acquiring from a different platform, from Redbus or third party, etc., but every passenger, while they are checking, they download app, scan, and then they go inside. And obviously once the app inside the mobile, you can, and you have to build strategic relation and reconnect with the customer to monetize. This is something which is like, even a company which is tech enabled, how you have to pivot and how you have to find continuously a dynamic strategic fit as the environment is changing for you. The second thing I would say, going to the another example of, there is a company which launched at a large scale consumer appliance, and they were selling it. Their entire sales was coming around 80% from offline sales. Suddenly they realized that now we have to launch, looking at the younger competition. They are evolving very fast every day. Internally, I could say, like, on a lighter note, it's very frustrating for some incumbent when they see that new age startup, they are coming up with some product, innovating it and raising funds. So they say that I'm here for the last 30 years. I have done so much of, I have this manufacturing capacity. I have this much of revenue. Why I'm not there in that phase? The fact is that you can be there. The only thing that, are you adapting the changes, or are you building that agility? First, you accept that you need to be agile and you need to open for the new learning. That's the very first to start, I believe. The second thing is, if you have accepted, are you now redefining your org structure? Are you welcoming new age people at your, in your leadership team? Or you are still thinking like a traditional experience based, something like that, right? So the second step is to change your organization in that way with the organizational fit. And the third thing now is, what is going to be now the strategic thing in terms of doing that? Let's say your product, which is there, one consumer appliance, I can't name it because of the confidentiality, but I'll say the same thing was selling, everyone was selling. Now they came up with something which is selling the same services as subscription. And I'm not talking about the general subscription, but this is something a first time in industry it's launched. It's like, for example, what if I say that, your AC now is at subscription, right? And launching as a, air on subscription, which is like completely connected. You are paying for that. So very similar product is launched in the industry. It's accepted widely, but it failed miserably at a first time when it was launched. Our proposition was that first time when you are launching, you have to define the unit economics, definitely. You also have to define the complete journey of the delivering this product. So define the value that, okay, if you want to go on the subscription model, how you will sell this subscription model. Are you selling smartly, or you are going with the traditional way of the channel partner, your offline team, etc., and all that? Second, once you have sold it, how you are managing the internal operation. If it's, the subscription is a very lean unit model, if you are not going for a automation or like auto renewal, auto recharge, maintenance, etc., and all that, you'll not be able to sustain this business model itself. So the second time, and probably the third time change in the last 9 months, is now where the business is unit economics looking very, very promising now. And where now it's like the front end and the back end, both the technology has been solved, the user journey has been solved, people are seamlessly subscribing the services and they are using it. But this happened only when, they accept the major thing was that now these new age people, they're leading this business. They have now certain freedom from the management that they can think in their own way, starting from adapting the technology, defining the user journey. Very first thing is like even changing the brand and setting up the brand tonality and the communication is connect to the TGs. Like I would say, there are millennials, there are Gen Z, the brand tonality, the connectivity also has a lot to do with the TG. Like, what is your TG? People who are using Uber versus people who like to buy a car are not the same customers. They have a different personality, and maybe they are also, they behave differently when it comes to different. Maybe when you are trying to sell them gold or diamond, the same person who is using Uber as a subscriber, they would not like to subscribe diamond, that they want to buy it. So, but there are certain behavior which needs to be defined very deeply, that what is your buyer persona, what is the traits, and thereby how you want to deliver that value very, very efficiently, so that your model is feasible, it has sustainability, and it has scalability in terms of, while you are doing these, right? So, day and night, I'm not as deep, I would say, like the professor explained everything so structurally, but I can just, share that how we are approaching things when we are going. And every time now we have a playbook. We know that if you are in incubement and you have a history of, let's say 30-year or 40-year legacy, for me, it's going to be more challenging for you to build a DNA inside your digital company, like your organization. But if it's going to be a nimble startup, I know that the startup comes with a mindset. He is completely open towards the efficient technology adoption. He is looking to the unit economics, and he is open for the lean ideas to scale, right? So that's what we, now present as a playbook. Coming the last part of my thing, this is what we are solving. Like we are the unique I would say a unique company where my partner, they don't have to go anywhere else. If you want to go through, if you want to, let's say you expand your business, you want to expand, like, you are selling only offline, now you want to go hybrid, or you are only selling the product, you are not in a subscription business and all, now you want to launch a subscription model, or you want to. So I'm saying, if you have a smart device, we are the company who will give or build capability to scale your business smartly, right? And ride on the technology wave where you will continue to adapt the new age company DNA, and you'll continue to be there, right? So this is something which we are doing. I'll happy to take questions, etc., in terms of doing that. But Growth Jockey is one company where it's a one-stop solution. If some people is thinking about that, how I can become now a new age, and whether I have to do a growth marketing, or I have to do build a technology, or I have to go for a very strategic technology consulting and all, you come to Growth Jockey. You don't have to go anywhere else. This is what we are mastering in the last 3 years, right, as a combined team.
Right. Thank you, sir. In fact, you kind of answered the next question that I was going to ask you about the challenges that different companies face, and how you've been helping companies cope up with that. So is there something that, anything more that you would like to add to this, or I have another question for you, and if not, which is that what are the latest trends that, because you work across sectors, so what are the latest trends that you've noticed? What are the latest trends across sectors that you've noticed? And if so, how do you help companies keep up with these trends? So if you'd like to say anything on that.
It's a question to me.
Yes, sir, to you.
Okay. So, see, the latest thing is not very new. I would say it's very common. The one common thing I see is all the board member or the MDs I meet, everyone wants to adapt technology. Everyone wants to be a now new digital company, right? So if I say what people are looking for, they know that the technology is the future. I have to enable, my product has to be smarter, my business operation has to be lean and smart, my scalability, my operations, everything has to be smart. I need technology and all that, right? But the question is not that they don't know that what they want. The question is, they come with a lot of baggage And again, they pretend that I'm open for the change, but they come with a lot of baggage in terms of that, I know that, how last 30 years has been, working for my business. So while I will listen to you, but end of the day, I would tell you that what you do, right? Here comes the biggest problem, right? Now, if this happens, you are not actually open for it, right? There are two categories of the leader I have experienced in the last 3 years. The first category of leader is really has either burned fingers or gone through or evolving very fast, irrespective of the age, learning very, very fast, very open. And that person is going towards and saying that, okay, I have to go and I have to actually build this, etc. And he's, when you interact with them, they are like super rich in their industry and product experience and all that. And but they will be very much open, engaging. You will have complete 100% attention while you are talking to them. There is a second category of the leader who just wants to be me too sort of thing. They don't have, right now any cash problem. They also do not have that vision to, let's say, my 1,000 crores should go to 10,000 crore. They are happy where they are. Their ego is subconsciously, I would say, is bigger than the company vision, right? So this category, the second category of the leader has the problem is that they come with unconscious mind with I know it all. And they have this problem to, adapting and opening up for the newer ideas, even encouraging. See, the newer generation is very much open to talk. They will not come with a very thoughtful way. Obviously, you have to guide and tenure them, accordingly, so that while they're discussing ideas, they actually do a F2S, like we say, feasibility, sustainability, and scalability, right? What you are talking, have you thought through or not? But there is a way to build that culture. You cannot just, depress people, saying like, if some young guy out of college coming out with the ideas and with a high energy wants to share something with you, rather you nurture. Instead of nurturing, you are just, executing the soul at a first place. I mean, like, I have seen it. So that's very bad. That's, I would say that's the biggest question which comes. Also, the second thing is like, I want to build it, but I don't want to invest because it's a new thing you are getting started. So your ROI is not going to match on the day one, right? It will match you. So are you, you also as an organization, and this can be a completely strategic call. If you have a cash flow, crunch, and if your existing business requires the cash reinvestment, etc., and all that, you can very well define that how much cash I would be allocating to build my newer capacity and all, so that I don't risk my fundamental business. But you need to define this very, very clearly. You cannot, like, be unclear about that. I want it, but I'm not clear, right? When I'm talking, I'm saying that, I have a lot of funds, you go and invest. But when team is reaching out to you, you are contemplating now that, okay, if I invest 100 rupees here, how much revenue I'm going to generate immediately? Or if I invest in 100 rupees in my increment, where I'm going to get that? Obviously, you will get there because this is a new thing you are building. You have to go, like, apart from there is 100 of playbook, your business is unique, your product is unique. Thereby, there will be some unique learning, and you should be open for it. Because if you try to force fit someone else's playbook to your business, that will also not help you grow very well. So I believe is like everyone knows what they want. The only challenge is like, are you really learning fast, or rather unlearning fast, in terms of, I'm being open to adapt these changes or not, right? So if that happens, then I have seen organization like, out of my, although a very good client, as I would say, I'm very, very thankful to them who trust us. I have seen some of them are really, really doing good in terms of, going, all right. New age companies who are very much open for the technology, they also make mistake because they go overboard sometimes, right? So the different problem for them is like, I want to do everything, with the technology. That is also not right. Like, for example, let's say, you want to sell one service. Let's say you are a digital company, you are a tech company, you have built a subscription model and you want to sell subscription. Now you want to sell subscription, you can go all over the place by solving. Now I am also going to build a complete automation towards the consumer acquisition, their management, my client acquisition, my team management, my etc. and all. So you lose sight by going, I would say, overboard, not concentrating on your core. Like if you are saying that I am going to be the tech company who will be, let's say, giving a subscription model, which is going to be, let's say, Zoomcar. It's a subscription company. They have started offering their SaaS model as well. Now anyone can use their model for the subscription. But Zoom has, let's say, built this and they have spent some time. If you are starting today, would you like to benchmark Zoom, all their solutions, like their supporting solutions, their enabler solutions, etc., or you would like to first go very deep in terms of your product, solve it right, create a delight, and then you say that, okay, boss, now I'm going to build another things, etc., where it will help me building efficiency, enabler, and all that, right? So to the young founder and young companies, we have been working, right, for them, like my masses, or my suggestion always been very upfront with them that, boss, it's good to imagine and you benchmark with all the companies, etc., which is around. But if you are here committed to solve one problem, let's master it. Let's go and beat the benchmark, not today, but for the next 5 years. No one like your rival can reach you in terms of doing that. Right. For example, I was talking to one of the company, which is like one of the very senior member migrating from Australia to here in India and wants to start a HR tech solutions. Now he benchmarked every company which is there in HR tech. You cannot, if you want to start, you have to be very, very clear that which one problem I am going to solve. And after multiple discussions, etc., they came to one place that, okay, I would be getting started with this sentiment analysis, right? And that's the strategic thing, etc. I cannot talk more about it, but now that is where they are being focused, that, okay, this is my start point. I will build this product. I will take the NPS to this level. This will help me putting myself inside the corporate. And from there, once this is built, I will build my, allied services, etc. So obviously there are 100 feature list you created, and then you selected 10 basis the unit economies, basis the strategic fit, or your, like future roadmap and all. And that's how we start. So I'd say like the traditional and the new age, both has a different set of the problem, and we try to contemplate, and with our learning, etc., we are continuously trying to, help them, because, so that we are living our vision, build businesses accordingly.
Right. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your experiences with us and throwing some light on this. I would now like to move to Mr. Umang Patel. He's the Associate Director, Business and Strategy, Cipla, the third largest pharma company in India, and it is also now present in more than 80 countries. Sir, what strategies have helped you carve a niche for yourself in the global value pharma chain?
So, overall, I think, thank you, my colleagues, Professor Vivek and Ashutosh has covered probably the similar topics. And to be honest, strategy sounds a very big word, but businesses are very simple. To me, it is a demand creation and demand fulfillment. And I think one, everybody should, and like what Ashutosh just spoke, I echo the sentiments. Play by your strengths. You need to identify what is your strengths. There are a lot of opportunities you would think you could go and get onto it, but identify what is your strength and play by your strengths. And in many companies, in a pharmaceutical, they have decided their strengths in a various ways. One could be in a one specific disease or a therapeutic leadership, where Cipla is a respiratory leader across the world, almost largest generic manufacturer of an inhaler. There are also other pharmaceutical companies who went to a cost leadership way, where they play in a very small product portfolio, but fully backward integrated. And there they are offering the lowest price drugs no one else can match in the world. So I think the starting point for me when we look at any market is what is our strength, and then the second step immediately would be to look at where my portfolio is relevant. The products which I am offering, where is the demand? What is the competition landscapes look like? Do I have a cost competitiveness over there? Do I have an opportunity to be in the first few competition? And once that part of the strategy is done, the third part play is how do you want to play? In any new market, to be honest, we have learned operating in an 80 countries, the best way to operate is have a good alliance with one of the local player who understands the local market dynamics. And it just because each and every country has a lot of nuances, the political environments, especially when we operate in emerging countries. Many of our markets are emerging countries where these are not the very streamlined or process-driven countries. The policy making keeps changing almost with every new government coming into place. In terms of consumer behavior, we are not the best one who would understand sitting in India. So it makes a lot of sense to have a strong partner in a country. Choosing the right partner in each of the markets to market your and then fully support the partner with a high quality, on time supplies with a great service and obviously the competitive pricing. And that helps you drive the business. And if you ask us what has worked for us is exactly the thing. We identified our niche with the respiratory.
So your voice is breaking a little bit.
Is it better now?
Now it's better.
Okay. So I was saying that this is exactly what has worked for us, is choosing the right product. We chose our leadership in a specific therapeutic area. We identified the right markets where the products were required. There was either a shortage or there was a gap where innovator was not able to meet the demands, or there is still an opportunity to be the first or a second generic player in the market. And then the third is going with the right partnerships in many of our markets. Out of 80, I mean, I operate into about 40 markets, and most of these are B2B markets where we largely operate through an alliances and the supply distribution agreements, licensing partnerships, joint ventures, these kind of exist. And some of these relationships are about 20 years and beautifully working for us. Still, the relationships are going as strong as possible. And this typically has worked for us. And I think we have seen in the pharmaceutical landscapes, for most companies, this is the way they are operating and they are being succeeding. Some are choosing to go deep in a few markets. Some are choosing to go wide and deep both. Companies, some of the top leaders, they only are present in the Europe and the US and India, not much wider into the Africa or Latin America or Russia CIS region. So each of the companies have identified their own niche, and this is what we have done as well. And that's what has worked beautifully for us, driving the business.
Right. Thank you so much for your response, sir. This brings me to the next question that I have for you. What strategic gaps do you see in the Indian pharma value chain, and how can these be resolved to enhance their global competitiveness?
See, I think before we jump onto the gaps, I would like to start with a positive. And when we go across the world, the good thing we hear from our partners across the world is that Indian generics are regarded as one of the best generic manufacturers, which we generally don't hear in any other industries like in electronics goods or the gadgets, or for an FMCG items. But for generic Indian generic manufacturers, they are highly regarded for the good quality. So across the world, they look at India to source their quality generic manufacturing, which is a very positive thing. We see the way the India has been branded. And during the COVID, we saw the Indian companies leading from the front, supplying the life-saving medicines across the world. The top 5-6 players have almost supplied all the life-saving medicines across the world, and which is a one positive thing, I would say. Now, in terms of the gaps, I think there are various gaps, and these are not something new you will hear. One is an innovation side. We are still a very generic manufacturers, or we are still a very playing in a generic space. We are not innovating. While there is a lot of research, R&D capabilities are at the universities, R&D centers are funded by the ministries or the governments, grants are available. But certainly we lack in terms of an innovation. And innovation, I would say it in three areas. One is a new product development. Second would be even in terms of a manufacturing. Though we are following the fourth industry revolution, when we still look at the waste companies, Germany or US manufacturers, the way they have upgrading their manufacturing line are way ahead of the curve than what we are. I'll give you as an example. From manufacturing of one product to the second product, there is a changeover time. It takes somewhere between 6 to 24 hours. Now the technology has so evolved for one of the leading companies I was attending the conference with. Where back to back they can manufacture with a 6 minutes of change over time. And that increases your efficiency, cost leadership, the manufacturing capabilities in multi-folds. And that's why we are still catching up. The second would be the global distribution. Though we are present across the world, we really don't have an organized global distribution network to streamline distribution of medicines across the world. The third area I would touch base is around an acceptance of an Indian pharmacopoeia. So in a pharmaceutical, there are three pharmacopoeias largely accepted. One is a British pharmacopoeia, US pharmacopoeia. And for India, the products which we consume in India, they are all manufactured as per the Indian pharmacopoeia guidelines. Now, this Indian pharmacopoeia, other than the India, not any other country is actually accepting pharmacopoeia products. The advantage is that a company which would have 2,000 products with an Indian pharmacopoeia developing for an Indian market, not able to take many of those products to the other world. And that's where the limiting factor comes. Though the quality is good, the pricing and the cost competitiveness is great there. But just because of the acceptance of our Indian quality pharmacopoeia is not there, that is leaving us behind in terms of offering the wide range of a product. And then the last piece would be around the backward integration. We are still a lot of reliant on China for our raw material sourcing. In fact, majority of the raw material comes from China, and that's where China has built their leadership. While we see there is a positive movement, there is a lot of forward trend.
So your
That's where
network,
we see largely the gap where we need to still catch up.
I lost your connection in between. I thought you had your network too. Sorry, please continue.
Hello.
Yes, it's fine now.
But I don't know where I left. But I was talking about the last point, which is backward integration.
Right.
And in the backward integration, it is about API reliance. The raw material excipients, we are still heavily reliant on China. Though there is a positive trend, it is still not yet there. It will take a couple of years to catch up there. So these are the largely four gaps, I would say, in a pharmaceutical sector, which we think India can still improve upon to be the leader in the world.
Right. So thank you so much for your inputs. With this, I would like to come to the last panelist for the day, Professor Anuj Kapoor from IIM Ahmedabad. So I would like to know your thoughts on what kind of challenges Indian companies are facing in terms of building global brands, and how can the rapid evolution of digital marketing help Indian companies become global?
Yes, thank you, Nikhar, for the question and the opportunity to share my thoughts here. I'll talk about this not from a perspective about all the Indian brands, because every sector has some subtle nuances. But in general, what I can decipher from my own working with quite a few Indian startups, first thing they lack is a coherent brand storytelling. What exactly their brand is trying to convey, right? Sometimes they are not sure about themselves, or many times what I see is the operational challenges in India are so much that sometimes they lose the strategic vision what they started with, right? And it's not the founder or the company that has to be blamed. Sometimes it's also the money they raised from, and that just takes away where they started from. So sometimes they also forget, sometimes they know they are forgetting it, but it's just that survival is pretty tough, and that makes them do quite a few things, which takes away from the brand storytelling with which they started, and that breaks the whole storyline. The other thing is, the second point which I see is, we all talk about network effects, and India is a large population. So ideally, the network effects should be high. But what we see is the quality of the network effects is something that we don't focus on. By network effects, I mean, I know someone else and someone else knows someone else, and that's how we create a web, and the customers then get onboarded, right? But it's also about the quality of the network effects and those nodes in the network that matter. And I have seen many companies not focusing on that. The third thing which I see is missing data problem, which is mostly like cold start problem, in the sense that and that has to go back to, I don't know my customer. If you ask companies, and I'm talking about more digital or tech or SaaS kind of models, what we see is they are all dependent on looking at those aggregate high level metrics, but not going deeper into what is happening. Using a lot of dashboards is also risky. That's how I'll put it. I'm not saying all the time you need to dig deeper into the data, but it's a good idea to once in a while have a check at what is happening inside. And what I see here is the cold start problem, where you don't even know your customer because you don't even see what kind of data exists. And because from data only you can know your own customer. And that is sometimes even recorded, but they don't know if that exists, right? The other thing is, within the data part, is the data has 5 components: velocity, volume, value, veracity, and variety. You will see a lot of companies actually lack, or they themselves don't have an idea about which of these 5V they are lacking, right? Ideally, you should have all 5, but it's not practical. But still, that is one thing I have seen where many companies lack. Most of them lack. The other thing that I have seen is the CAC, right? You want to acquire customers, you grow by stupendous percentages, but what people forget is, what are you deriving out of your customer, which is the lifetime value or the CLV, and they forget the CAC, which is the acquisition cost. So you're acquiring people, but you're not looking into what you are making out of them. So ultimately, you are acquiring them, get them on hook to your platform or your company, and then they go away. So in a way, you are losing that money. And then you have customers who have been acquired by spending a lot of money, and they don't have a network which is high quality network. In a way, they will also get people who will come, but they'll also go away. So a lot of focus on growth, but not sustainable growth, because ultimately you have to balance lifetime value, and acquisition cost is something that I have seen is an issue that hinders or that stops them from reaching the potential that Indian brands have. The other thing which I see is solving a hard problem. But again, that's a function of, to solve a hard problem, you really need the willingness of the VC system. Along with that, you need high quality people to build the organization, right? And most of the time I have seen the focus is on sometimes taking business models away from some other geographies, some other countries, and implementing them here. Again, I give a lot of credit to people who implement that, but you have to tweak the business model again to the situation that is in hand. The other thing that I see is role of artificial intelligence. I see some companies using it, but not many, though it's an amazing tool, but you also need human feedback loops to actually make it work, right? That is something which I also get amazed, role of artificial intelligence in driving growth. Apart from that, what I see is a lot of marketing happens, but again, marketing happens from the outside. But you know what? The idea of product growth hacking, where your own product sells and you don't really need to market it too well outside, but it's just the features of the product that they start selling, is something which I see missing in many of the Indian brands. Apart from that, what I see is chasing metrics. But what kind of metrics? If sometimes you chase one metric which is very short term, you start losing focus on the long term nature of your matrix, right? And your business. One or two last things that I have noticed here is explore and exploit, right? What happens is, you know about your customer, right? And you know what they like. Usually we go into the loop of providing more and more of that. But Spotify has done some interesting research, and they have shown here that if you keep on giving your customer what they want, that leads to more churn and less people converting from your free to a paid model. Partly because you give what I want, I get bored, and I actually ascribe that boredom to you as a brand or a product rather than taking it on me. That is what I wanted. You see that happening with a lot of tech companies. You go to a LinkedIn, you go to a Facebook, you go to a Twitter, you like those posts which you don't like inherently, right? But still you say that, oh no, LinkedIn keeps on showing me same things, right? That is partly because of the fact, because this is what you're liking and this is what you are giving hearts to. But as a platform, especially a new age tech platform, where recommendation systems become a crucial part of what you're doing, you really need to make sure that you explore new choices that a customer might make. If I like something, there is a high possibility I like 2 or 3 other things. Why don't you also prescribe me those in the form of recommendation systems? And for that, you also have to be more risk taking and more nimble in suggesting me new things, right, as a platform. Apart from that, one last thing that I see here is data-driven mindset. I still feel that people say data is good, digitization is awesome, consultants come on board, they digitize everything, but still that quest to explore and actually be okay with making data-driven decision making, of course, keeping intuition in mind, is something which I see as missing. But hopefully, if we can work on some of these factors, which is quality of network effects, looking into your data, going a little deeper rather than just relying on dashboards, using AI, leveraging it as a tool, and including humans in the loop, along with chasing long-term as well as short-term metrics, and explore and exploit. I think these are some of the key factors that can make Indian brands more global, and they can actually have a sustainable growth ahead.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing such rich insights into how the customers are thinking these days and giving us very contemporary examples like Spotify. This brings me to the last question that I have for the day. What benefits does establishing a virtual presence entail for B2B brands planning to advance their business, and how can they leverage the medium to expand their international presence?
Right. I have just 3 pointers on this, which I have seen again working with few firms and doing a lot of executive education programs where we see a lot of B2B firms coming up and talking to those executives. 3 things is, first is, when we say virtual presence, no one is saying that you should not have a physical presence. It doesn't mean these are substitutes. So that means omni-channel, and that also means consistency, right? The first thing is, virtual does not mean that the physical is obsolete, right? Meeting over Zoom does not mean you cannot meet people in person, right? And that's one thing that has to be always, which is very intuitive, but still it has to be put through, that these two are complements and not substitutes. The other thing that I see is, which one can learn from consult firms, is in a B2B presence, you see we ultimately know B2B is selling. You're trying to sell your service, right? But if you follow the model of consult firms, they don't sell things directly. What they usually do is they come up with a lot of stuff which is soft selling, right? Which is more high level, but that actually puts you as a thought leader, right? And people are likely to trust someone who has more thoughts and is considered to have more, not selling at the heart of it, right? But talking about something bigger, some large picture things, right? And establishing themselves as a thought leader. I'll give you an example of a firm with whom I'm working, and I'm not naming them, but they're a voice AI startup, and they are trying to go further into debt collection. Now, essentially, what we are trying to do here is one way is pitching what they are doing. The other way out is we are doing some extensive studies with them, right? Where we are actually documenting the role of, as an independent body, right? The role of a voice AI in across different domains, right? There is no selling in it. Of course, once the white paper comes, it will become a selling point and it goes into the inbox of many of their prospective clients, that puts them into a different zone compared to directly going and selling, hey, why don't you purchase my services, right? And the third and the last thing is that I see is role of influencers and medium. LinkedIn is a good medium if you are a B2B platform. Having your own blog or having your own dedicated resource website is again a good medium where you're not actually selling stuff, you are making people aware of the problems they are facing and then providing them solutions which are not specific to them and not in a very preachy way, right? And also using a lot of influencers in the form of thought leaders, existing thought leaders. That is a good way of actually building your own digital presence, and that actually let people have faith in you. Last point which comes from here is, and it reminds me of Dominic Barton's, the former McKinsey managing partner. He mentioned that I call two executives, it's a B2B play. He calls two executives, and the first thing every day, every single day, and he asks them, what are you doing and what are the problems you are facing, right? Rather than selling anything. And then usually sends a report because they do extensive work there, and then start the conversation about selling something. These are very intuitive things, not any rocket science or big frameworks, but somehow still people miss some of these very, very basic things, which once they get aware, they realize, oh, we were missing on that. And that's B2B for you. B2C has a lot of all these frameworks and messages. B2B is still very personal, but still sometimes we lose some of these very intuitive things. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, sir. There was some pretty good insight. Professor Suneja, is there something that you would like to add to this, or anyone, Mr. Umang Patel, any closing thoughts?
Perhaps we can also ask are there any questions that people may want to ask. Otherwise, I think we've had a very interesting people coming from industry, even academics coming from different areas. And when that happens, the whole is more than the sum of its parts. Synergy means ek aur ek gyara, not ek aur ek do. And too often we are now caught in small bits. So analysis, but it needs to be followed by synthesis. My own name, Vivek. Viv means vivid, vistar, several. Ek means one. So एक जो है उसके अलग अलग एस्पेक्ट्स हैं, मार्केटिंग, एचआर, इंडस्ट्री, वो एक को विव करना है, दैट्स एनालिसिस. बट फिर उस विव को एक करना है, दैट इज सिंथेसिस. And when the world becomes super specialized, becomes too complex, so everybody knows a little bit of a little aspect, where do you get cross fertilization? That strategy to bring things together, विव को एक करना, synthesis, is extremely becoming difficult because we just know a little area. But I think, there used to be the old saying, jack of all, master of none. But I think we now need to be jack of all and master of one. But we still need to be jack of all. So I don't think there's a trade-off. There's a complementarity between being jack of all and master of one. And I think this has been an excellent synthesis of ideas coming from different places. I wonder whether anybody has questions from the audience, if we could take that.
I don't see any questions in the chat box,
Right, okay.
Or even in the QA.
Right. Perhaps we can have some closing thoughts from everybody else here.
Right.
So this is a great Professor Vivek. I think the few things which keeps coming back in a business, which are the basic fundamentals, to be honest, even to the audience. It's simple about focus. Where do you focus? How do you focus? Caring for your customers, knowing your customers and caring for your customers. And the third thing which keeps coming back is understand your strength and decide your playground. And I think these are the 3-4 things. If you get these fundamentals right, is an emerging of the industry. So, a lot of now moved towards live conference. So we talk about data is another thing. Much better customers even now since before. So these are the industry-wide trends. I think it's a great transition and betterment across the industry. Increased use of AI, data analytics, provides the efficiency and the efficacy both of the products and customer.
Right. So, Professor Kapoor, is there anything that you would like to add to this?
No, I think I would say thank you for the invitation. It was great to hear Professor Suneja, Mr. Patel, and Mr. Ashutosh as well. And I learned a lot with these conversations. And thanks a lot.
You know, Nikhar, when Mr. Umang was speaking, his voice was sometimes breaking up. And I was wondering, this is how exactly the real world works. Some messages you can read. I mean, Anuj is in this business. Rest you have to lip read. Rest you have to guess. And that's what entrepreneurship is about. You know, there's so much information out there. Some of it tacit, some of which is just hidden. You know, Umang was saying we have to work with alliance partners because only they know what's going on. But you have to pick a reliable alliance partner. And when you don't know what the market, even picking a reliable alliance partner is an act of partially faith and judgment. So,
I agree.
Yeah. So you know, the very word intelligence. It comes as a conjunction of two words. I mean, you can see I'm very interested in language and the root words. The word intelligence comes from inti and legion. Now, legion is like a Roman legion. Legion is a collection. It can be an army. It can be a collection of words. Inti means like an interval, intermission, between, right? So intelligence means to read between the lines.
I was about
There's
to
lines,
say.
there's knowledge, and you read between them, which means like lip read what Umang was trying to say or the market is trying to tell you. So it's an act of creativity.
I was about to tell you that you forgot to say we also have to read between the lines, and then you got
Right.
intelligence.
Right, absolutely. So we have to read between the lines and we have to be creative, which is another aspect of strategy. Strategy is not about the old, it's about the new. And the great thing about the new, frankly, which is why maybe next time we can all go to Missouri or to Goa or whatever, is that, you know, the new cannot come out of the old. The new has to come out of the unknown. So before a brainstorm, you do have to do a brain calm and be entirely, completely silent. Otherwise, you will never have new thinking. It will always be an extrapolation of the old. Any lateral creative thinking comes out of emptiness. So that's what meditation is. To empty your brain, you know, trash everything into the recycle bin and be empty. So then the new comes. So, but you have to study. Archimedes, before he had a eureka moment, he had been thinking about the flotation principle for days and days. And then he left it and went into the tub, and then the water comes out and it's eureka. So you need more knowledge, you need application, but then you also need to let your brain lie completely fallow. And that iterative process is creativity. But it's lovely to meet fellow panelists who are all thinking creative people, and for you to prodding us into thinking and taking this forward. So thank you, Nikhar.
By the way, just to add on an intelligence, Professor, decade back, you would not have heard about a dedicated function called the business intelligence in corporates. But now almost every corporate has a my first trouble in an organization as a function, as a team. Just keep watching over the industry plans, pricing, who are the top buyers, top sellers, how the competition is building the portfolio. A lot more of insights. These insights helps you a lot more, I can tell you, in terms of designing the growth strategies, the future brands. And there is something evolving as well.
Yeah, right. And a lot of business schools from Harvard to INSEAD, and maybe I'm sure even I'm Ahmedabad, we're doing this at FMS, we're teaching mindfulness. And the Buddha in his eightfold paths, two of his paths were, one was Dhyan, which is mindfulness. The other was Samadhi, which is basically to empty your mind of the known. And I think that ancient wisdom applies not just how to manage your life, it also how to manage corporate business. Management is management, whether you manage your spouse or your dog or your company. I think it's the same principles apply. Anuj was talking about intuition. Management is common sense, except common sense is deeply uncommon. The most common sense is a misnomer. Where is common sense? Show it to me in the newspapers. There are wars, there's gender war, caste war, national wars. Is that common sense? Common sense is deeply uncommon. And I think the reason it is, one, we rely on experts. Number two, we get conditioned. We don't use our brains. A lot of passive thinking, very little active thinking. I mean, thousands of thoughts in a day. How many of them do you think? How many of them just come to you? If you think 5 active thoughts in a day, I think that's good enough. So, yeah, thanks.
That is a lot of food for thought, sir. Not just for companies, but like you said, even personally, management applies to every facet of life. And with that, I would like
to add on your spiritual mindfulness. It is so good to learn that it is being taught in a B school now.
Right.
Because after being in a corporate, what we have learned is your IQ would get you to the first few years of your career. EQ will make you a good manager, people's managers. And if you want to even drive further, what you need is a spiritual quotient, more mindfulness. And it's very good. Very good. And thank you for organizing the session. Really, very insightful.
Right. I would like to thank you all for taking time out for this discussion and sharing such interesting insights with our audience and us. With that, I would like to close this session now. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Nikhar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.